Between January 6th and 7th, the northeastern United States was hit by a giant winter storm referred to as a nor'easter, bringing lots of snow, heavy wind, and freezing temperatures across the region. And guess who was flying to New York during this time? Yup, this guy. Today I'm flying from Chicago to White Plains, New York on a rather empty American Eagle Embraer 170. What started off as a rather uneventful flight turned into a thriller when it was time for landing. I'm glad you're coming along, so let's get right into it. Good morning everyone from Chicago O'Hare. After arriving from Bloomington into the very end of Concourse G, I now have to make it across to the opposite end of Terminal 3, more specifically the L Stinger concourse, where my next flight departs from. Connections at O'Hare, especially within Terminals 1, 2, and 3, are always rather straightforward, and even on my short layover today, I was able to make the walk in around 15 minutes. Today is my first time departing from the relatively new L Stinger gates opened back in 2018 as an extension to the existing Concourse L. The L Stinger concourse is accessible via a newly added walkway, but before we go on further, let's check out our flight status. So far, our flight 3812 is still showing as on time, which is a huge relief considering the weather hitting the East Coast at the time. It was so serious that I received an email from American a few days earlier, allowing me to make changes to my flights without issue if needed. The walkway across to the Stinger gates is very clean and neatly built. It also offers a lot of windows to look outside, although unfortunately they're covered in some sort of dotted window film. That's actually our aircraft on the left, sadly not that retro livery E170 on the right. The Stinger gates are really nothing special. There's one main restaurant, but it's really just all gate space. I reached the gate right as boarding commenced, and based on what I saw in the gate area, it was going to be a pretty empty flight.
Group 5 customers are welcome to board flight 3812 towards Chester County.
Our aircraft today, despite being nearly 20 years old, was only delivered to its current operator in September 2023, and it's got quite the history. Originally, this aircraft was delivered to regional airline Mid-Atlantic Airways, who operated it and a bunch of other E170s under the US Airways Express brand, hence the MD at the end of the registration. When Mid-Atlantic ceased operations in 2006, these aircraft continued flying under US Airways Express, this time operated by Republic Airways. Our aircraft even flew with Aeromexico Connect for about 7 years before returning to the States and Republic Airways, this time operating under Delta Connection and later American Eagle. Envoy Air configures these aircraft with 65 seats consisting of 12 first class and 54 main cabin seats. Interestingly enough, even though rows 8 through 10 are main cabin extra, so are the A and B seats in rows 11 through 14. The D and F seats in rows 11 through 14, interestingly enough, are standard main cabin, which I never understood why. Another random thing about the Envoy 170 is that in order to keep the aircraft at 65 seats due to scope clause limitations, seat 21F is blocked, meaning that only 21D can be reserved in this row. Now, reserving seat 21D can be pretty challenging because this seat, in addition to 20A and 20B, remain blocked until online check-in. The reason for American blocking these 3 seats is to guarantee seats being held for basic economy passengers. But once online check-in opens, all of main cabin is fair game. I had actually reserved 21D during online check-in, having moved from 20F, because I wanted to showcase the uniqueness of this seat. Unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, American moved me up to main cabin extra the day of my flight. I'm assuming due to my status and because the flight was empty. I was able to select main cabin extra seat 13A for free, since for status holders, these seats are also free at check-in. The seat back is rather standard, with a large tray table and seat pocket with the usual in-flight literature. Legroom in main cabin extra is plentiful as always, with a generous 34 to 34.5 inches of pitch. You'll also find universal power and a USB port for every pair of seats. At the passenger service unit are the air vents, reading lights, and the sole call button. Boarding was quickly completed, and it was clear that because of the bad weather in the Northeast, not many people were flying there today. The weather in New York didn't seem to be a bother here in Chicago, as we prepared to push back relatively on time. Flights between Chicago and New York are usually rather full, so it was pretty bizarre to see how empty our flight was today. Despite the headrests on the 170 and 175s being adjustable in that they slide up and down, you actually can't fold the sides in like you can on the mainline aircraft. That's something I never noticed before. Because of the light load, the crew on this flight were very efficient and excellent. Snack service, just like my last flight, was both pretzels and cookies instead of just one choice like I'm used to seeing. For the beverage, I went with orange juice. Free Wi-Fi is available on the 170s, and through the website you can purchase internet access, stream entertainment, check the weather, and other relevant travel details. Internet access, as always on American, was rather pricey on this flight and not something I'm going to spend my money on. The entertainment options themselves are rather plentiful and more than satisfactory for any domestic or short-haul flight. Now, unfortunately, despite this aircraft having in-seat power, none of the outlets were working, which was a minor inconvenience. So earlier, if you recall, we discussed the interesting configuration of the Envoy Embraer 170, in that seats 11D and F through 14D and F are standard main cabin, while the A and B seats in these exact same rows are main cabin extra. You can clearly see the difference in seat pitch from the standard main cabin seats compared to where I'm sitting here in main cabin extra. It really is quite significant, since apparently the main cabin seats on the D and F side of the aircraft actually have 2 fewer inches of pitch than the main cabin seats on the A and B side, 29 inches as compared to 31 inches, so take note. It's the same in main cabin extra, although the difference is quite minimal, as the seats on the D and F side have 34 inches, while the A and B side I'm sitting on have 34.5 inches. But other than that, not much else to report on. The flight went by rather fast, and soon it was time for descent into New York. The flight was pretty uneventful up until this point. The East Coast was still getting hit by snow at this time, which made our approach quite the thriller. Ideally, we'd approach from the northwest, passing upstate New York and southwestern Connecticut before making a 180 over Long Island Sound and landing on runway 34. Clearly, as the flight playback shows here, that was not the case. Due to poor visibility, the pilots couldn't see the runway, and as such, we had to execute a go-around, the first time I've been able to document one of these in a trip report. After our missed approach, we entered the pattern for runway 34 again in hopes of landing on our second attempt. Let's see what happens.
For us to be able to pick up the runway for the approach that is available. So right now, we have a good amount of fuel on board the aircraft, which is the positive. So we're going to probably try to find a place to hold for a little bit, see if we can get some visibility increase. We're talking to the company now, trying to figure out the best course of action. That's all the information I have for you right now. I'll get back to you as soon as I get a little bit more. Thanks for your patience.
Visibility didn't improve much by the time we made our second attempt. But after going around for the second time, we entered a quick hold before trying again for runway 34, which thankfully was a success.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to land. Unfortunately, we cannot answer the call assist button. However, if it's an emergency, please press it one more time. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's our pleasure to welcome you to White Plains, New York, where your local time is 12:02 p.m. You may now use your cell phones. Please remain seated with your seatbelt fastened until the seatbelt sign has turned off and you hear the safety gate. Keep the aisle clear. Please be advised, ladies and gentlemen, it is 34 degrees outside and it's still snowing. Before stepping off the aircraft, please make sure you have something warm on before stepping off. We are not assigned a gate at this moment. Most likely they might have us deplane the aircraft by staircase. Please make sure you have something on before stepping off the aircraft.
I really have to commend the crew on today's flight for being on their absolute A-game in all aspects during the flight. Even despite the struggles we faced in trying to land in White Plains, they were very helpful in keeping us updated on what was going on. The flight overall was pleasant and I have no complaints. I expected that we would have some sort of hiccup when trying to land, but it was still a comfortable and safe experience. Great work as usual from Envoy Air and American Eagle. Thank you very much for tuning in today, and I hope you enjoyed this rather unique flight experience. If you're interested in supporting the channel, consider checking out my Patreon linked in the description, and don't forget to like and also subscribe if you're new here. I'll be in New York for about a week before flying home, so until I see you next time, take care, stay safe, and goodbye.